Hey, greetings everyone from our home to yours. I hope that this finds you safe and well. Happy Sunday. Today we're going to talk about what the CSB Bible calls the cost of following Jesus, found in Matthew chapter 8, verses 18 through 22. I think that I disagree with the CSB version of the Bible using the header, the cost of following Jesus, because I don't think there is a cost. I think that he has paid that cost already. But let's listen to the passage and see what you say. Matthew chapter 8, verses 18 through 22 says, "When Jesus saw a large crowd around him, he gave the order to go to the other side of the sea. A scribe approached him and said, 'Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go.' Jesus told him, 'Foxes have dens and birds have the sky, or birds of the sky have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head.' 'Lord,' another disciple said, 'first let me go bury my father.' But Jesus told him, 'Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead.'" So some pretty tough words, right? Especially to the disciple that wanted to go bury his father. I mean, those words, "let the dead bury their own dead," that's pretty harsh. Commentators have stated that Jesus' reference to "let the dead bury their own dead" is the fact that the man's father probably died about a year ago, and after a year there's a customary second burial that this guy's trying to get to. Either way, it's still pretty harsh. So how many of us have read this or heard this in a sermon or a Bible study where they've used this, whoever was teaching or preaching, have used this as an example of two people who decided not to follow Jesus? Or how many times have we heard this taught that, or how many times have we heard this taught that this is something that we're not to do, that this is an example of don't be like these two people because they didn't want to follow Jesus because of some worldly thing that they were holding on to. Have you ever wondered why we think that way? I mean, how did we ever start using this passage as something like that? How did we ever get the idea that these two people didn't follow Jesus? How did we ever start using the passage that way? I mean, in the next paragraph, we see disciples on the boat with Jesus. Who's to say that those two disciples didn't get on the boat? I mean, we just infer that they didn't, right? I ask this because there's no response in the Bible. I mean, there's no stated outcome to those questions and statements in the Bible. So anyone that's teaching that those two disciples walked away and stopped following Jesus inferred it, guessed. And so teaching that would be at least extra biblical and at worst totally unbiblical, right? So why is this in the Bible if it's not about two people walking away from following Jesus because they wanted to focus on their worldly priorities? Well, I think it's simply to teach us what the priority of following Jesus is. So the first man walks up to Jesus and says, "I'll follow you anywhere." And Jesus says, "Hey, foxes have dens, birds have nests. I've got no place to lay my head," meaning that he doesn't have a house. I think what he's telling the guy is that following him is not about riches or fame or building a name for yourself. Jesus is saying they're going to travel a lot. There's lots of places to go, lots of things to do. And so possessions and hanging on to possessions isn't going to work because you got no place to put them and you can't carry them around with you. And to the second person who wanted to go and bury their father, well, I think it'd be interesting to do a deeper dive into the spiritual metaphor of the dead burying their own dead. We'll have to save that for another day. I think what Jesus is telling him is, hey, what's the most important thing in your life? What's the most important priority in your life? Is it going and being with family on this ritualistic thing? Because I think if this man was truly burying his father, that Jesus would definitely tell him that that's a priority and to go do that and come back. But this second ritual, is it that necessary? What are your priorities in following Jesus? And I think what Jesus is saying, that stuff like that ancillary stuff, should take a backseat to a life of following Christ. And I think what Jesus is saying is that following him is the most important thing in your life, and all other obligations should actually take a backseat. That's it. Two statements that teach about the importance of following Christ and the priority of following Christ in our lives and what our priorities should be. So this is not a cautionary tale of salvation or the loss of it for chasing worldly desires. It's not a tale of two people who couldn't give up stuff in order to follow Jesus. It's simply Jesus telling two of his disciples to get their priorities right. And like I said, anything that says different is just not there in the text. So when you go planning your day or planning this week, may you make following Jesus your life's priority. God bless you. Grace and peace to you.